3D remissions, isn't it? So
No, we're just debating one at a time. So this one here is,
Items, development
Okay.
ready land and development contributions.
so we're doing targeted rate for development ready land. Page 372. Okay, there is no debate, so we'll move to the board voting.
The English or the grammar.
Approve changing the general rate other differential. There needs to
mean
be some
other
quote
rate?
marks around something there.
Steve, are you on this? Can you come to the table, please?
Front up, mate.
Keep your head down though.
It's either other than or other. I'm not sure what it means
So
actually.
the other, you put this other into speech marks. So after you make the decision to rename the rural differential other differential, which is A, council then approves changing the general rate other differential
Right.
to be less than the residential rate by the estimated appropriate allocation of water and wastewater. So probably need a comma and some speech marks. Does that help?
Are you just going to randomly let councillors choose where to put those commas and speech marks?
Becca, did you get that?
Approves changing the general
Thank
rate
you.
other differential,
The differential.
yeah, comma after
Comma.
general rate, yeah. And a comma there as well. Can you put a comma after general rate, please? Council approves changing the general rate other differential
Put a
to be
couple of
less
spare
than the
commas at the end in case we need them.
residential rate. How's that work, Dave?
I understand what it means now. I don't know how well it works.
Just tell me what, sort of in English, what does it, what is the goal?
Gary, we finished questions on this yesterday. There was a mountain of questions. Do you really want to start again? We did. We got to the stage of debate on these 3 items.
I can't remember talking about it.
Three together, wasn't it?
That's right, yeah.
but we only talked about the first one. Rent.
Okay, Steve, could you explain the paper, please?
So throughout the Revenue and Financial Strategy Task Force, we were looking at the opportunity to collect additional revenue from where growth is happening. And we explored several opportunities that are talked about in this report. At the end of the day, those opportunities carried a lot of challenge in terms of rating law and a great deal of risk. And the conclusion was to go back to an option first considered in the Mayor's report back in March, was it? Around the rural differential and the fact that rural rates were quite low, and when we looked into it, a substantial amount of investment has been spent in this building every year, in the planning department in particular, but across the business, that is a direct benefit to land currently not developed. When I look at the district planning zones, there is no land in the city that has a permanent zone of rural. There is some, the closest you'd get to that is deferred residential zoning. And so on that basis, we're investing a lot of money every year into making the future city bigger. And the proposal was to recognise that in this differential by changing the name away from rural, because we essentially don't have rural land in our city, And that's, so it's other land that's not residential and not commercial. And that the differential should be set at the same level as the residential rate, less the services of water and wastewater that these properties don't get.
Deputy Mayor Martin.
There are other district councils, you know, like Dunedin, for example, that has, you know, much more realistic boundaries, but you have, goes up right up to Middlemarch. So you're saying that if we're just unique in the sense that we're probably the only, us and Napier, probably the only two local authorities that actually have essentially only urban dwellings, is that right? Every other local authority, I think, exception of Tauranga, but everything, most others do have a rural component.
I mean, Auckland has a substantial rural component going up the west coast there on the Manukau Harbour, and Dunedin, like you said, Middlemarch, and yeah.
If I was getting a comparison with Tamahiri, Rotokawa, you know, with the Waikato district outside of us, how do they? Because again, they don't have rubbish and water, I think. I'm just trying to look at sort of an apples with apples.
I don't understand the question. They're clearly rural land.
Yeah. I mean, I'm looking at a comparable dwelling in the within Hamilton City, and then just across the border in the probably Waikato district. I'm just wanting a comparison.
So at the last rates review, we compared rural rates on one side of the boundary with the other side of the boundary.
Yeah.
And in the context of a rural use, our rates were slightly higher than Waipa's, is my recollection.
Yeah.
What we're saying in a city that is growing as quickly as ours with the investment that we're going, though, the rural use isn't as relevant because of our investment in growing the city.
Yeah. And obviously the land is there zoned for potential urban development.
Yes.
Right.
Okay, we'll go to the board for voting. Sorry, we're going to debate first. Any discussion, any debate? Okay, Councillor Gary.
Okay, with your leave, can I just ask a question?
Sure.
Sorry about that. Okay, I think what you're trying to do is you're saying that there is no rural land, so it should be now called other, and that there is a rationale for having a differentiation of the rates. No, that's right. I don't expect you to listen to two people at once.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's all right, Blair. I do it all the time. That land, that there's a justifiable rationalisation or justifiable reason to have a rating differential, i.e. charge different rates for this thing called other, and that rationale is that it doesn't get some of those services, and those are the services you've less the value of water and stormwater.
Yes.
Is that right? Okay. So you're trying to create a separate rating category, not a district plan category, a rating category.
Yes.
But which we used to call a differential, but now you're calling
Well, it's still a differential.
Okay.
And it'll still collect roughly 1% of our total rate.
So the net effect of this for these people will be that currently they're getting a differential, but we're now going to replace that differential with a reduction in their rates so they're going to go to a normal what rating will these people go to? What?
So they'll pay more.
Okay.
As shown on page 365 in the bottom of the page.
365.
365. So that extra amount they're paying, the path of the journey in their rates is for rural land that's undeveloped. Moving to capital value, we'll see their rates go down.
Oh, yes.
And we've made that decision. Adding 15.5%, we'll see their rates go up. And then changing the differential to the new other differential, which is 72.1% at the top of this page, 365. Changing that differential to 72.1% of the residential rate will see their rate go up a little bit more. And one of the things that council should consider is whether not so much the percentage rate increase necessarily, but the amount of rates that if I take the first example, a $690,000 rural property is currently paying $1,673, is proposed to go to $2,720, which is, if we go up to a $680,000 property in Rototuna, $3,500, so they're still paying a lot less than an equivalent residential property.
That $2,720, does that factor in that reduction for water and water and wastewater services?
Yes.
Okay. So to get to that 2,720, we've got to pass this?
Yes.
Okay.
Councillor Henry.
Well, we are in that boat. That's okay. But what I just want to ask you, so does the zoning then change as well? Because at the moment it's rural residential. Will it then change to residential?
Rural residential is a rating classification.
Oh, is this already? Okay.
The land is zoned under the district plan, whatever it is zoned.
Okay, so
So
even
there's
though...
no change to the district plan.
Okay, just the rates change?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, we're going to debate. There's no debate, we're going to the board.
The motion is carried, 11 for, 1 against.
So we're now going to, over the page to page 376 on the development contributions. We have discussed this, we have had questions on this, so we're going straight to debate. Yes,
Sorry, I
all
have a
right.
question that I didn't ask the other day.
far away.
In C, the introduction of development of DC charges for selected capital projects with costs programmed outside the 10-year plan period. I'm not sure why we wouldn't have all capital projects programmed outside the 10-year period, i.e. if they're in our 30-year infrastructure plan or some other plan, why wouldn't they be all included in DCs?
DC man Greg.
Thank you.
DC.
So there's several criteria that you have to meet in order to allocate costs to be recovered through DCs. As you get further out in time, irrespective, you still need to maintain or establish a causal nexus. So there's an element of risk the further you go out. That's one element. A second element is multiple interventions. So if you have a major wastewater upgrade in year 7 and then another one in year 14, then it's pretty hard to establish a causal nexus between development today and a second intervention, because typically it would be taken care of in the first intervention, for example. Another reason is that some assets don't have the required capacity life to justify it. So if you have an asset that only has a 10-year capacity life, you can't recover it over a 30-year period.
What sort of assets might those be?
Wastewater assets that only have less than 10 years of capacity life left in them.
New assets that have a life that short.
So you're right. There would be an unusual event. I think that, I mean, the best way probably to think about it is which ones are candidates for it, because there are a number of tests that need to be met. And the assets that are the best candidates for it are assets that are in a single greenfield catchment that ultimately service the entire catchment and therefore can be recovered across the entire catchment, which will have a, you know, like Peacocks and Rotokauri, for example, have a catchment life longer than 10 years.
Yeah, but that's the very point I'm thinking of. Peacocks has got a development period of 25 years or something like that, from start to finish, to full up. And we've had a history in Rototuna, by example, of not charging under our DC policy for assets that are outside 10 years, almost exclusively. So we've missed the boat until we get them falling within the 10-year in advance period. and I'm pretty sure that the continuation, for instance, of the Spine Road in Peacocks, which isn't in the current 10-year period but is in the 10 to 20-year period,
That's right.
would be used by every single household in Peacocks, even if they're built in the next 2 years. So I can't think of an asset that we would be building, stormwater, wastewater, water supply, roading, parks, walkway, cycleway. I can't think of anything in Peacocks that wouldn't be used by everyone in Peacocks at some stage once they build their house.
Yeah, I think assets in Peacocks will be one of the best candidates for it, for sure. But I guess I'm saying we say that selected capital projects, because in fact a lot of them will just be precluded because of that legal test. If you charge a developer tomorrow for you know, a water main, you know, a smallish water main in 15 years' time, they're not going to receive benefit from it. You can't actually establish that causal link, and if you go to a contested hearing, you know, on that, you know, I couldn't, you know, you wouldn't be able to show that there is a causal link between those two. But in the case of the Peacocks assets, where they do benefit the entire catchment and they're in that single catchment, then those are the ones that we'll, you know, put forward to...
We don't program as a council to spend on a small local road or local stormwater. That's part of the developer's job to do that. We're talking about we program the arterials, you know, the ones that service large areas. And so it seems to me that everything we program, because it's going to be a cost to ratepayers generally, you know, that local argument doesn't apply to me.
Okay to take the word selected out?
Something like appropriate, or the selected seems to me less than we could.
So appropriate
And we may, sorry, could I say, we may change, if the government changes its rules on
Amenity.
Amenity things, we may midstream want to start charging for that. Policy would seem to make it harder to.
So, but ultimately, Greg, the selected will come back to this council for those selected items, won't they?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, so we'll have the full list, and when we're talking about selected, it's based on some criteria by which these elected officials will select the list.
Correct.
So the selection is not necessarily to minimise it, it's to imply some form of criteria being assigned to it, is my understanding. But
Yeah, that's
the appropriate is just as good as well.
All DCs have criteria applying to them.
If I might, Chair, we've just been having a quick chat. We thought that maybe the term selected strategic infrastructure, that picks up Councillor Dave's point, that if we can clearly identify the causal nexus and the benefit for example, a spine road in appropriate timeframes, then it's specifically connected to that selected strategic piece of kit, not the entirety where you can get into the grey area.
Don't have selected, have strategic, I think, instead.
Yep, that would...
I just think the word selected limits us,
Yep.
and it will be used against us in a hearing, for instance, a remission hearing, potentially.
Yep, we can strategic's okay with you, Mr.
Good.
DC man?
Yep.
Councillor Paula.
Just a question on the process. Given that there's 3 parts, are you taking, and there's option 1, 2 and 3, you know, are you taking all parts separately, please?
I can do if you want me to.
I would like that, thank you.
Councillor Taylor.
Thanks, Mayor Andrew. I just got some slight concerns about removing the CBD remission abruptly, given that we're focusing a lot of attention on the CBD. Is that something that could possibly be phased in over a couple of years, year 1, year 2?
So council can resolve to do as it pleases in terms of bringing in the change to its policy.
So you could possibly do 50% year 1 and then the full thing year 2 or something like that?
Yeah, no reason why not, yeah.
Wouldn't cause any complexities or issues?
It's pretty straightforward because the CBD remission is this very singular element.
Okay, thank you.
Of that.
I think as a starting point, you could just apply that percentage to so the numbers that I did was 1.2 million per year being the impact of, well, being the additional DC revenue for CBD compared to if you retain, you kept the CBD remission.
So 600,000 would be if it was 50%.
I think at this stage, with the numbers we've got, that's a good, fair estimation.
So a loss against budget of 600. On top of yesterday's 800.
Yeah, okay.
You got a question?
Yeah.
Gary?
How important is the CBD remission? I know this is a very difficult question. How important is the CBD remission? Because there seems to be quite a bit going on in the CBD at the moment. And you just said that we are possibly foregoing, I think you said 1.2 million, did it?
Yeah, that's the
About a
estimate.
million.
1.2 million per
So
year
we-
for the 10 years.
So every year, the apartments and the Matt Stark stuff, and all the stuff that's going on in town, and the DHB building, all of those things, I assume, are subject to the remission. They are beneficiaries of that.
So anything with a new dwelling or a new square metre of floor area will attract, would have attracted a DC and therefore,
Okay.
would have been
So-
given
so,
a DC.
What's happening with the Old Farmers building won't attract DCs? Would not is not benefiting from the remission because it wouldn't have been charged any, well, very few.
In general terms, yeah, no. If it's the same floor area, then no DCs. So yeah, so redevelopment of existing buildings, so refits, that kind of thing throughout the CBD wouldn't attract DCs at all. Something that would attract a lot of DCs if they were being charged something like a new 8-storey hotel or 10-storey hotel.
So the
something
Genesis building would be an example of something that got more square footage, I think.
Yeah, well, it had a big supermarket. I'm actually don't have immediately, in my hands, but something like the building down by the river, now the ANZ building where Gothenburg is. So that was this classic new floor area, new retail and commercial, and that would, attract, DCs.
So that would have benefited from it.
It would have.
Okay. Okay. I'm just trying to get some sort of guide of whether or not it's going to suddenly put the handbrake on development in the CBD or not. It's hard to.
Yeah, well,
know.
we'd like to know. I mean, in my team, we have a lot of data and information about, but the tricky bit is trying to detach them from each other. So I noted in the report there's the CBD, there's been an increase from 19 million to 44 million, since 2013 in terms of building consents. But then we've had an economic boom and we've had on the back of, another development boom. And I think the feedback we've had from the development community is, it's obviously it's a positive. It certainly generates, some additional development in terms of how much. It's difficult to tell. And the other thing it's difficult to tell is to the extent that it makes something not feasible when it would have been feasible with the CBD remission. So that's your kind of, does it stop it or does it make it go? And I guess, we can take economic advice, but it is difficult to quantify.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to debate. So we're voting on A, B and C as separate motions, but we're debating the whole three together. So the concept of removing the CBD remission was something that happened when Richard and I were down in Wellington with a bunch of government advisors, and they weren't speaking to us at all. They were speaking to a group of mayors through the country, and they said, you guys need to be really careful with your DCs because this cities all around the world that got half finished, their pipes got full of sewage, they hadn't collected the DCs, they couldn't do the upgrades because they didn't have the money, so the whole thing stalled halfway through. And we've got pipes that are half full, and we've got a city that's building, and they're cashing in and taking a percentage of those pipes every time another apartment goes in, every time another hotel room goes in, every time another floor on a commercial building goes in, and it's filling those pipes up. And the day will come when we'll have to say that's it. We either need the money in the kitty that we've collected from DCs to upgrade those services in the ground, or we've got to borrow because developers didn't pay their way, and the ratepayers right across the whole city are going to have to pay going forward for that upgrade. So that's what really checked me and caught me out and made me realise that that advice was very prudent, and we needed to sit up and actually take notice of that, because that's exactly where we're heading and that's exactly how we'll get caught. The second part is removal of the caps on development levies. There's sections around town that we're putting out that we've discounted by $10,000 a section, or a certain amount per section, because there's other parts of town where we can do it cheaper and we're trying to be fair. But what it means is if it costs us more for those sections and to develop those sections, we need to be charging what it costs the city. The ratepayers shouldn't be subsidising development. And the third one is we can only, at the moment, we can only take projects that are inside our 10-year plan, but we have a 30-year plan. And those projects that are outside of the 10-year plan, and there's a lot of projects that sit just outside the 30-year plan, we can't grab those and bring them into our development levies. So we need to actually be ensuring that developers pay for development and that the city isn't crippled by the development that's happening because we're not collecting enough DCs off them. The big one is the amenity DC, where the last government took away our ability to collect amenities, which means that places like Rota Kauri haven't been able to be developed with amenity like they should have been by the development levies coming off the sections and paying for those parks to be done, paying for the library, paying for the swimming pool out there. And so now the people of this city are having to pay for those, and that's something that we will continue to lobby central government on to try and get that brought back in, because that's part of what's crippling our city moving forward when it comes to amenity. And like Paula says, a balanced city has amenity and infrastructure, the two go together. Councillor Ange.
Thank you, Mayor Andrew. I'll be speaking against motion 1, but I will be supporting motion 2 and 3. The very purpose of the reason that we created the CBD remissions policy was to dangle a carrot to developers to come into the CB and invest, and it is working. And it does concern me that we have a staff report where they're actually unable to tell us of the impacts of if we take this away. A developer spoke to me just recently, and he's putting in 70 or 72 residential units in the inner city. And he spoke to me at great length on how the incentive is working, and it was the tipping point for him to put in those residential homes in the city. So that, again, anecdotally tells me that it's working. The benefits of infill development, as we all know, is that the strategic infrastructure is there. It is more cost effective, and more importantly, it's actually working. This policy is working. We should be incentivising infill to continue. I do not support putting the brakes on that when we are achieving results. It just doesn't make sense.
Councillor Mark.
Thank you. A very similar line here, actually. I am voting against A and for B and C. I take your points on B and C, and I'm very excited about hopefully being able to get a lot more amenity money out of development contributions down the track. I agree that there will come a time when we do need to remove the CBD remissions, but I don't think it's quite yet. I agree that I think it's contributing. It's not the sole contributor, as you've pointed out. There's an economic boom, and it could be anything. But it's something I think we've got a long way to go until the city that I campaigned on starts to take shape. I mean, this is really simple for me. I campaigned on building up rather than out, and this is the one that is a no-brainer for me. So I'll be asking to keep this in for a bit longer and keep watching this space. So I'm against A and pro B and C. Ding.
Councillor Dave.
Building up is absolutely great because it doesn't use up productive land any more than the footprint of it. You can get a lot of things on a single footprint. The problem is that all of those people, all of those businesses living in that put pressure on all the community facilities, roading, all the infrastructure around it. They use the parks, they use the buses, they use the cycleways. they use the car parks, and they use them in our infill DCs generally, and this goes for CBD DCs just the same as brownfields, you know, out in the suburbs, existing suburbs DCs, is that we have not been charging enough to pay the costs. We have huge costs, which you've seen in the Access Hamilton and some of the other infrastructure plans for roads, intersections, transport facilities and other infrastructure, parks, destination parks, whatever, in the existing parts of the city. And that's where existing ratepayers spread across the whole city are having to pay for that. Not the people that actually developed, put the extra house on the section in Claudelands, put the 10-storey office block where there was only a car yard in the CBD before. All of those sorts of things, the growing ups rather than outs, has actually led to huge costs. And I think that are not being met by the current DCs we're collecting. We did discount infill DCs considerably when you look at the actual amount. It was about half of what a Greenfields DC was. So it was very attractive to build, but it didn't cover all of our costs. And now we've discovered that we were living in a bit of a fool's paradise. So I think one of the things that happens when you do realise you've made a mistake, you try and correct it. Now there is an issue, and Jeff's raised it. Do you correct it all at once, or do you continue it? Do you spread the load a bit, I think. And I think that that's the question's still out in my mind, but we absolutely must decide to correct it. Otherwise, we're going to end with infrastructure that people who weren't involved, weren't even living in the city, are going to have to pay for because the developers got a cheap ride, not a free ride, but a cheap ride. And, you know, we just have to start making the developers pay for that area. You know, you've all heard people complaining about the city, we should stop growth in the city. Well, the reason they're mostly complaining is because they don't want to have to pay for it. People saying we shouldn't have to pay for Rototuna, we don't live out there. That's because we weren't able to collect the full DCs. Well, where we can, we should be doing that, and as soon as possible.
Councillor Gary.
Thank you. I think one of the principles we started out on this whole project was that growth was going to pay for growth. Now, unfortunately, and Greg will know this really, really well, it's not that easy to calculate the cost of all growth, and there is, at the margin, we're always, guessing's the wrong word, I won't be disparaging, but there's a lot of art in this process, and it's just simply, you can't, it's very, very, very difficult to say which apartment. Was it the 9th floor or the 10th floor that that maxed out the sewer line? Very, very hard to identify that. So I think going from the preposition that to the extent we can calculate it, we should be charging growth, paying for growth. To not do that is simply creating some sort of favouritism. Now, the CBD remissions was, whether you like it or not, a denial of the growth pays for growth principle and an unfair advantage to people who are doing developments in here else compared to other parts of the city. Same with the caps, which is simply some suburbs were more expensive to infrastructure up, so we said, okay, no one will build a house out there because the DCs are so high. Everyone's going out to Rototuna, so we'll have to put a cap on there, otherwise we'll max out Rototuna and they'll go to some other place. So that again is the same thing, and it gave an unfair advantage. But yeah, and the thing I do understand, and that is that it is a bit contradictory to what we have been trying to do. In terms of the CBD, when I say we as a council, we have tried to focus on the CBD and try and revive it and reanimate the thing, and it seems to be starting to work. It's not a deluge of development in town, but there's a lot going on. I don't know to what extent that will be shooting ourselves in the foot. I hope we're not, and I certainly hope that that the sort of increase that we're talking about here affects guys at the margin. So some guy along the way, some developer will say, no, $15,000 I'll pay, but I won't pay $25,000. But and we don't, as I say, we don't know where that margin is. So I'll be supporting those two. And And I'll be supporting number 3 as well. But I don't want to talk about number 3.
Councillor Paula.
Thank you, Mayor Andrew. I'll be voting against A and C, but in support of B. Just in terms of the CBD remission, when I read the report that staff put to us, it seemed, although not some of the evidence is anecdotal, it did seem that the CBD remission was bringing about some increased investment in the central town, which is consistent with the policy that we have around city revitalisation. If we change the policy and go a different way, that's quite a different matter, but we haven't had that discussion actually. But if anything, I would prefer to have, I liked the approach that Councillor Taylor suggested around giving some adjustment time and phasing it out. And in respect to the infrastructure, I just make the point that I would hope it wouldn't be too far past 10 years that we would start to spend development levies on the things that they're supposed to be spent for, even though I do agree that there should be a 30-year infrastructure plan. I don't think you can collect money for some project that isn't due to start for outside the 10-year period, in my view.
Deputy Mayor Martin.
Yes, this is a proposal. If the proposal is ultimately adopted, as I understand it, doesn't kick in until July 2018. So, number one, if you are a developer in the CBD area, you've got plenty of notice. You can make a submission, or you can get cracking and get your you don't land bank. You get your application in. I've often quoted the example of Palmerston Street, whereas I personally live in the Grantham precinct, I think they call it, lovely area, lovely litter on litter day, and then you cross the Palmerston Street Bridge and you're outside the CBD. So I think in a way this is all a bit arbitrary. I think if we go up and look at some developments, I think, you correct me immediately if I'm wrong, Gut Royal Kiwi Road, we've got a whole lot of developments sort of what you call central city but are not in the technical CBD area. And it just seems to me what we're trying to effect here is a fair rating system right across the board, and in the end you might want to incentivise a good and that's somewhat illusory in my view in this country, good developments. That's an interesting point, but everyone else actually ends up subsidising that development. You know, what is fair, what is not fair. So if you look at it in point of fact, throughout all of Hamilton now, we are increasing our density. And I would argue that the time has now come, frankly, to seriously consider lifting that CBD, and that the CBD developers should pay their way along with the rest. And the message about this is not, and I want to stress the other thing, this is not catching people by surprise. This is not the old Rob Muldoon on budget night. We're putting the petrol tax. Everyone rushes out to the gas station to get the cheap gas before midnight. You know, this is giving notice. You have till July 2018. You also have the opportunity to submit if you think we've got it wrong.
Councillor Jeff.
Thanks, Mayor Andrew. Yeah, I can see both sides on this. I am concerned that we don't disrupt the progress I feel the city has made in terms of revitalising the CBD, and quite possibly only a small part of that is down to the CBD remission. But all the same, I would hate to feel that we may actually discourage any developer right now. We've got good momentum. We're spending a lot of time and effort on revitalising the CBD. We're, things such as the river plan, such as providing more parking, such as our terrific 2-hour free parking scheme. And I would be loath to see us abandon that incentive at this stage. I'd like to see us signal to the community that, hey, we're thinking about it, and I would actually signal an amendment that we phase it in over 2 years and just test that to see if there's any support for that around the table. I just feel...
Get it up first, so we know what
oh, sorry.
Keep going, Jeff. keep going, we've got the
For
amendment
number one, we phase it in. This council has angsted a lot about the CBD in the last 5 years, and there's been a lot of work go into it with the last council, and this council is continuing that. And I would just like to see us, rather than just pulling it, I'd like to see us signal what we plan to do, but just to phase it in over 2 years. I don't. Yep. Over 2 years. I don't know if I've got a seconder.
So do we have a seconder for that?
Do we need to ask the financial impact to doing that?
Second an amendment. I don't think if you've already spoken, you can second an amendment. Oh.
No, she's talking about
Yeah.
seconding.
Stephen, do you need a bottle of financial impact of that amendment? Is there an impact?
$600,000 at 50%, and probably the 50% should be in the resolution, so we're all clear.
Propose 50% in year 1 and the full amount in year 2.
So that's 600,000. This is put into your budget, isn't it? The savings already, is that right? So that 600,000 would go back onto the budget.
Effectively debt impact. Yeah. We back out DCs from a balanced budget point of view, but debt.
Yeah.
Greg, can you work that out reasonably easily?
The charge,
You'll be able to work that out over the next 2 years?
yes.
Should it go through? Thank you.
Sorry, I thought it was already worked out. It's 50% in year 1 and
No, I'm just
100%.
making sure that logistically it's realistic for our staff to be able to work that out and put it through on. That doesn't create a nightmare for our staff, that's all
No,
nice.
it's pretty straightforward with the DC amendment.
Okay. Jeff, you're happy? Who seconded it? No, Siggy, you happy? Okay, I'll take my right of reply. So, 72 apartments in the CBD at $50,000 profit each is $3.6 million profit for the builder. We're asking for $1 million back at $15,000 per unit for DCs. So the developer makes 2.6 instead of 3.6, and we don't palm off the cost of upgrading our pipes to the general ratepayer, but the developer of the property actually pays his way. That's what this is about. It's simple. Developers make profit. They make no more profit. They make more profit in the CBD than they do anywhere else because it's so intense. There's nowhere else under our planning rules that they can build so many units on such a small block of land. And the profits from that flow through. So I'm just checking you guys, but you're happy to spend money. We're all happy to spend money, but we've also got to have revenue to make the city work as well. And what you're doing here is voting down revenue. Just have to be careful of our emotions and actually think about business as well to a certain point. Let's go to the board. So we're voting on the first one first, and it's the amendment of the first one.
That's correct, Councillor Miller.
The amendment is lost, 349 against.
So that, and we're now voting on the motion for the first one.
The motion is carried, 8-4, 4 against.
So now going to the second motion.
The motion is carried unanimously.
Now go to the third.
The motion is carried, 11-4, 1 against.
Okay, we're now going to Closure of eyesight, page 97 to 99. Sorry, yes, page 97 to 99. Now, before we get started, there's a motion to put up on the board on this, and there's an amendment to go on the board, so we'll get those up to get started. We'll get started while Becca's putting those up, and Becca just gives you yellow once you're ready. So we'll take the paper as read. Is there anything you need to add, or do we go straight to questions?
Look, I think the best approach would be to respond to questions for this item.
Okay, so we'll just, we've got them both ready to go, Becky? Okay. So,
isn't the, on paragraph 6, page 97, those are direct opposites, aren't they? So, doing it or the status quo. So if you don't agree, you just don't vote on it.
It's not a recommendation, Councillor Millett. They're
Oh,
the two
okay, sorry.
options.
Okay.
There's only one motion. No
Ange,
amendment.
did you have a motion? Oh.
I did, sorry, I sent them the wrong one, well, not the wrong one, just unfinished. Just an amendment, just a couple of minutes.
I can do my best and give you my best, and that's why I'm wanting to say what that will. I can explain that. But what happens if I get the position is there's nothing comes up? There's no one leaves between now and then on stuff.
Councillor Jones.
Could I just ask a question of the governance manager?
Sorry. The amendment, okay.
Could I just ask a question of the governance manager? Is A needed if this is an amendment? Can't we just, because without A's basically, if B's all that goes through is effectively we keep eyesight open anyway. So do we only need B? Isn't A a direct negative to the resolution?
It's my view that if the amendment and the motion are taken as whole and not in parts, that the amendment is not a direct negative. And I think in the context of that, it is possibly needed because B on its own does not imply that that eyesight remains open. That would be my interpretation.
Councillor James.
Oh, thank you, Chair. Sean, just a couple of quick questions.
Hang on, I haven't got a seconder. Deputy Mayor, are you?
Oh, I'll second your one. Sorry, is the motion not got a second?
No, it's got one.
Oh.
It's done. Okay, it's done. All right.
Normal Deputy Mayor's enthusiastic support.
The poodle's wagging his tail.
Councillor Jones.
Just a couple of quick questions, Sean. Do you have the numbers of visitors to the eyesight each year, on average? Yes, so certainly for the last financial year, we had around 47,000 contacts. Around 43,000 of those were walk-in, 4,000 people roughly came in either online or by telephone requesting services. Those numbers have been reasonably static for the last 4 or 5 years. A little bit of a drop here and there, but usually in that sort of mid-40s mark. Okay, and the second and my last question is, do you have an estimated total of spend by visitors to the eyesight, as in bookings made or items purchased? The net revenue is actually listed in the paper. The net revenue is around $103,000. That's, when I say net revenue, that is after the cost of sale. So, for example, if they sell a hotel room and they get a commission off that sale, that's net revenue. Same with any ticket sales they do. The only thing I would add is that whilst the revenue generation is a deliberate part of the business model in order to defray costs, the business model has never been predicated on being a going concern or being profitable in terms through its revenue. Otherwise we wouldn't do it at all. The private sector would be doing it. Whilst we'd love to get more revenue in, that's not the primary purpose of the business model, which is there more to provide a service and a welcome to visitors and Hamiltonians seeking help and information. Thank you.
Councillor Siggy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Previously, the eyesight was at the transport centre, is that right?
Yes, a number of years ago.
Yeah. Do you have any data from there, how many contacts there were, or was it a bit harder to measure? Or
look, I couldn't tell you. I don't have the information going back that far. I don't actually have a lot of history, but my understanding, it did move from that from the transport centre, because it wasn't quite gathering up the type of visitors that it was there to serve, and they found that being within Garden Place enabled it to, be part of more of the centre of town and be in a much more visible location.
Okay, because that's what I was just wondering.
Yeah.
Have we looked at, maybe at other places like the museum, where there could be even more people coming in different sites? Because quite often in other cities there's different sites where it's connected to much larger traffic, like where it's sitting at the moment. There's not a huge foot traffic. So is there any other places that you've explored in Hamilton where there's a larger foot traffic?
Look, I think it's a good point, and it will always be a bit of a debatable point as to what is the right place. I'm not quite sure that the foot traffic at the museum would necessarily be better or increased foot traffic for those types of visitors than where the eyesight is at the moment. What's really important is that people know where it is. And that it's an easy and convenient location for them to go to. Now, if you are in a much larger city, and Hamilton's not a large city by all means, yes, you will find eyesight type operations in multiple locations, and quite often they will be attached to a major visitor attraction that will be downtown.
Okay. Last question is, with the 43,000 walk-ins, do you know the age range?
No, I don't have that statistic, I'm afraid.
Because that would be really interesting to know.
I know from my own experience when I'm in that office, and I have to admit to it not being that often, it's quite a range.
Okay.
It's interesting, at certain times in the mornings you get a lot of backpacker, younger traveller market. At midday you get a different sort of group or type of traveller. So I would, off the top of my head, answer that it's quite a broad range in terms of the age groups. I guess I would also add to that that I would argue, and whilst we don't have the statistic on it, that there's probably almost as many Hamiltonians will come in for service and advice and support as you would get, New Zealanders I should say, including Hamiltonians as international visitors. So it's covering a wide range of markets. The last couple of years, I do know that since I've been involved with it, the eyesight team, for example, have dealt with a lot more new families coming to Hamilton, in terms of giving them advice and pointing them in the right direction and so forth. So it's a very mixed audience.
So that sounds like it's instead of the Citizen Advice Bureau a little bit. Well, it's
people new to town. Hey, where do we go if they want to start exploring?
Right.
Or exploring the region.
Yeah. Do you think it would be good to do like a little bit of a research on what kind of people do come in, where they come from, why they come in, and that kind of stuff? Would
Yes, I think so.
be more helpful?
In terms of for our specific operation, yes. Tourism New Zealand, who coordinate the eyesight franchise right across the country, they do a lot of research, primarily with international travellers, and so they do have a lot of good data as to the nationalities, the types of people, the why they're using our services. And the primary thing that does come in is people want to talk to people, and quite often like to have that face-to-face contact, you know, the people-to-people contact, which is still pretty important in the visitor industry.
Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Dave.
Yes, I'm looking, I've just noticed a comment down the bottom of the disadvantages box on 98, where it says closure of Hamilton eyesight and removal of service may signal to central government, Tourism New Zealand, etc., that Hamilton does not place value in the visitor industry or our visitors. Of course, that could be very quickly corrected, could it not, if they were told how much we put into Waikato tourism on an annual basis?
Look, we could certainly work to correct the perception, but as you're aware from presentations that you've had, Hamilton Waikato Tourism is the second least funded regional tourism organisation in the country. So that is also something that's quite well known, so I'm not quite sure how we could use that. We could certainly counter any poor perceptions about our view on visitors to the city if we were to close the eyesight, but it would send a signal out there that would be unfortunate. We would be the only city, and even, you know, if you look at the number of towns who have eyesights that wouldn't have an eyesight, and that would be that's what would be newsworthy. I should add.
How much do we put into Tourism Waikato each year?
Just under 600,000.
Okay. It's set up by Tourism New Zealand, which has a number of tourism organisations like Tourism Waikato, the Eyesight Network, affiliated to it, like Tourism Waikato. In other areas, does the local branch of Tourism New Zealand, or if you call them branches, the local tourism organisation, does that operate the eyesight anywhere else?
Look, there's around 90 eyesights throughout the country, and a number of those, there's probably around close to a dozen of those are operated by the Department of Conservation. They are all primarily, with a handful of exceptions, funded through local government funding sourced in one way or another. In many instances, it's like us, where the funding is directly with council or through council or a part of council operation, or it might be through the regional tourism organisation, or it might be through some other entity or trust or whatever that's set up in that particular town for whatever reason.
The hotel reception desk, some of them are eyesights, aren't they?
I'm not aware of any.
I certainly see the eyesight sign in some hotels and some.
You'll see the eye sign, which is a brochure rack, a separate brochure rack business, which isn't part of the eyesight franchise operation. You'll see that frequently in hotels, but I'm not aware of a formal eyesight facility in a hotel lobby, but there may well be. I'm just not aware of that.
So you said some tourism organisations do run eyesights.
Yes, there are some privately owned eyesights. So if you take, for example, Queenstown, the eyesight in Queenstown is a private business that has been, right from the very start of the eyesight operation, but the market in Queenstown is so much different to what we have here.
That wasn't what I was asking, Sean. I was asking if some tourism organisations, as in Tourism Waikato.
Yes, no, definitely some regional tourism organisations do operate the eyesight franchise, but once again, I'd stress their funding to enable them to do that as a part of the mandate that they take on behalf of their funders. You know, that impacts on the level of funding they receive.
Okay, Tourism Waikato is based out the airport, which is not exactly a tourism mecca or pass-through point for Hamilton much, is it?
Yeah. No, well, Hamilton Waikato Tourism isn't currently geared up or sort of being mandated or created, I should say, to be a drop-in visitor centre for advice at all. I mean, it's very much a marketing promotions administration office that they have out at the airport.
But there's a fair bit of synergy potentially between that backroom operation and the front room. They
already coordinate quite closely. So Hamilton Waikato Tourism have quite a strong relationship with all the eyesights in the territory that they cover. You know, for Hamilton and the other parts of the Waikato that fund it. So yes, it has a close relationship in terms of cooperation if there's sort of any campaign or promotional activity. They certainly cooperate in content that goes on the various websites and things like that. Yes, I mean, you can, any regional tourism organisation can choose whether or not it wants the delivery of the eyesight operation to be a part of their organisation or enterprise or not, depending on the circumstance and so on. So it's a choice, and as I say, it's a mixed model on that front around the country, but it still has to be funded.
So you could envisage, could you not, for instance, say Hamilton Waikato Tourism operating an eyesight from some of the spare ground floor rooms in the council building, for instance, and so therefore sort of lower rent. I mean, I understand that's one of the reasons they're out at the airport.
Well, I think the airport is obviously the airport company formed the regional Hamilton Waikato Tourism a few years ago, and it has always been seen as good neutral ground for Hamilton Waikato Tourism, bearing in mind that there are a number of other councils that co-fund it as well. If Hamilton Waikato Tourism were to get involved in delivering an eyesight service, it would probably need to do so as a part of a bigger picture in terms of the rest of the eyesights that are in the Waikato region that are currently funded by the local councils that they support.
Are they all funded by the local?
Yeah, pretty much. I think, but once again through different vehicles. So they would have to look at if, for example, we were to ask them to consider taking over or being interested in running the Hamilton eyesight. They would need to look at that in the context of what's the strategy and the program for all the other sites for the stakeholders that provide their funding, and get a coordinated look for that in terms of how that would happen. I would say, however, that there are a number of eyesights around the country, and I think, in my understanding, it's been the case for Hamilton Waikato Tourism, who have actually quite deliberately kept away from being involved in the day-to-day running or operation of eyesights because of a desire to focus on what they see as their core function of promoting destinations and products and services. So, so there's an argument that some cities argue they should be kept separate for operational reasons and for reasons of focus. There are some cities that say they should be combined, and so it's a very mixed view.
Okay, thanks.
Councillor Robb.
Have we undertaken a financial review of the eyesight to investigate how we might increase sales, we might share costs with other TLAs? I think you've covered that question off already. And opportunities drawing on the other eyesights that operate around the country?
Look, I don't want to make this a long answer, but the whole concept of the eyesight franchise is that every eyesight delivers the same standard and level of service to its customers as every other eyesight. The second part of it is that the eyesights have a common look and basically a common logo and presentation. The third part of it is that every eyesight supports the other territory of the other eyesight. So it's everyone's paying it forward to each other. So if you're an eyesight here in Hamilton and you put all of your product and information and you're part of the franchise and network, you know that the eyesight in downtown Auckland in the Viaduct, if someone walks in there and says, hey, we're going to go to Hamilton next, what do you think we should do? That eyesight will deliver great information and relevant information to that person to tell them where to go next. And so that's really what's quite important with this, that everyone is actually working together. Tourism New Zealand They provide the glue to hold the concept together. They created it a long time ago, and every few years they ratify that they're still doing that, and their funding goes into providing the glue and the mechanism to hold the site together, and their funding also goes into much broader promotion of the eyesight franchise or network to visitors and prospective visitors offshore with the activity that they do. So they carry a lot of push. So there's already a lot of coordination going on and a lot of helping each other out. We even help each other out with staff locally. So one of our eyesight staff at the moment is in Te Awamutu, I think, or somewhere, just sort of helping out. So there is good relationship, cooperation. In terms of revenue, yes, we would love to sell more so we can defray costs. However, that is getting tougher, and it's always commission based and everything else. We have in the eyesight have done. I know Jason, who looked after the eyesight, Jason, before I took it over, had done a review of revenue. I've certainly not done a major review, but I have worked with the manager there. We sell souvenirs, and we actually have quite a reasonable turnover to earn a little bit more money. We sell tickets to shows and events. It's not a core part of the business, but it's something that we've added in there both to earn a little bit of extra revenue, and also if I put my major events hat on and event sponsorship hat on and H3 hat on for the city, so that we can actually get more service and more value out of the eyesight for them to deliver more for our events. So, for example, the eyesight is basically a facility that if anyone is staging a major event in the city, if they want to use it, they can use that office for anything they want. And so I am using it as much as I can to add value to other sort of areas, for promotions. If there's things taking place in Garden Place, it will be the hub, the downtown hub for the Sevens coming up, in terms for the ticketing and the EWOT bands, and it did a lot of work over the Cricket World Cup. So we are exploring a lot of areas. We're about to trial rental bikes. So we are looking at things to defray costs as much as we can, but making sure that in doing so we're not adding cost, or that we're doing so at the expense of the core purpose.
But we haven't undertaken a review where we've compared, our operating costs or our net operating cost with other councils around.
No,
given
we have not.
I mean, you
done
covered
that.
off that there were 90 of these operating around the country.
Yeah.
They must proportionately, if the business model is the same, they must be all losing these levels of.
Yeah, that's correct. The only thing that I would say is that there are some places, and which is why some of them are privately run, that have a greater opportunity to sell tickets and sell stuff than what we ever will.
Yep.
And that's a sort of tough part of it and disappointing. So if you...
and that's because of their location?
Yeah. If you're the eyesight in Wellington, your primary revenue is driven by rail tickets for suburban commuters.
Okay, yeah.
So it's all those sorts of things, and so we are struggling to work out extra ways.
Okay, we could have that in due time, rail tickets.
Hopefully.
Okay. If the service is moved inside to a desk within council, would there be an additional cost to do that?
Well, basically, if you had a desk within council in the reception area, and if you're saying one desk, one person, there'll be a cost to that person, but you will no longer be an eyesight because you won't be living up to the standards that's required to be a part of that franchise. So the question you would have is, and you won't be part of their promotional thing in terms of the drive of sending people there. How will people know that you're there? So I think we're in a tough position where you're either in or you're out.
So we couldn't use one of those rooms downstairs. There's
we
those
could.
separate rooms and branded eyesight.
Yeah, we could. The rental that we're paying is between $70,000 and $80,000 at the moment in terms of the current location. So,
so
that would be your saving. But if you want the full thing, now I do know that when a few years ago when the reconfiguration downstairs in this building happened, the original plan was to locate the eyesight so it would be part of it and adjoining the reception area that's down there now and the front counter and everything else, but there was I'm told at the time there was no space and there was no opportunity to do that. That's the advice I've had And I seem to recall that being the case at the time as well. So it was, once again, that would be a total reconfiguration.
Is that still the case, CE?
Poured out.
I was suggesting whether or not there would be a suitable room down on the ground floor in reception where the eyesight could set up, you know, a kind of a separate office in one of those rooms on the ground floor, at reception, and suitably brand it. Sean responded that when that was looked at a few years ago, there wasn't the space.
I think the space requirements come from the requirement to have certain criteria met to be an eyesight.
The scale. Yeah,
there's a scale requirement, a certain aspects to it. It would require reconfiguration of the ground floor.
And you certainly need high visibility. I mean, the eyesight, we've done our best to give it pretty high visibility. The location's promoted, you know, quite heavily, and so forth. And yes, look, there are some eyesights that are a part of council reception areas, but they've got the space in order to do that.
What's our present lease obligation? You mentioned it was 70 or 80,000 a year.
Yes, sorry, I've just looked it up. It's 87,000 a year.
A year.
And we have a year and a half to go on it.
A year and a half, so that would be December of next year, or slightly over December of next year?
Look, it is in the paper here somewhere.
Okay, that's all right. So I wasn't sure on the motions that went up whether we had changed the motions to cover off redundancy, because is your motion, Mayor Andrew, the original motion that's in the book?
No, it covers off. It's
okay.
The proposal and the budget put forward under the LTP provides for redundancy provision if required.
Okay. So that motion is suggesting that if we go to close the eyesight, we won't be offering that service at all in the city. Is that the way I've read that?
The proposal is as it reads on page 97. This para 2, so right at the top of the page.
Yep.
This proposal looks at the closure of the Hamilton eyesight and providing a reduced level of visitor information through the already existing front counter staff in a municipal building. So the concept was that our staff on the front counters
existing staff would provide
would be trained up. That it would be a like a visitor information, like Hamilton Information and Tourism, that would run through those counters, and it would do exactly what it's doing now, apart from the ticket sales.
So they would stand in the queue with the ratepayers, with people paying rates and paying other expenses and coming in for general queries and so forth?
Well, I envisage there's about 5 or 6 counters there, and from what I can see, there's never more than about 4 open, so I envisage that there's room there, and it's set up to actually take more staff. But all of those staff, all our front counter staff, will be trained up to be able to handle any information, tourist information or queries that were required.
Okay. So just the last question, Sean. If we undertook a business model evaluation or review, do you think that there could be some outcomes that would reduce the cost? And that is, you know, comparing what we do with other eyesights, looking at, you know, increasing sales and generally looking at our staffing levels and so forth. Is there an opportunity for us to reduce that $565,000 cost each year?
Look, to be honest, I'm struggling to find that saving. The fact that this is an operation that has to run, or under the eyesight model, run 7 days a week, requires, you know, a shift of a certain number. We effectively have 6 full-time equivalents now, or 7, spread across 9 people, and they do rosters. I'm not sure how I can tighten that up further. We only had the eyesight only has a promotional budget of $30,000, and to be blunt, I pay a little bit of their bills through H3 when I'm trying to, you know, get news out on them, because that budget's so tight. I just don't think I have any wriggle room at this stage to make it suddenly be better. The other option, which is a much bigger picture option that I alluded to before, is whether or not there's an opportunity to work with the other surrounding councils and say, is there a way that we can collectively have a joined up strategy and a joined up approach to eyesight delivery for the region, and as a result of that find efficiencies for all of us. But once again, that hasn't been explored, and there is a possibility there, but once again there's a question of will that be doable and achievable to a level that will make us feel much more comfortable about where it's at.
Thank you.
Councillor Paula.
Sorry, Your Worship, I wonder if I might foreshadow an amendment should Angela's fail. Is that okay at this point?
Democracy.
Thank you. Yeah. So it's very, very similar.
No. 43 are walk-ins, 47,000 are contacts. 74,000 is for. Yeah.
But that's should Angela's fail, right? Yeah.
So is Angela's above that?
Above that, yeah. Hers is the A and B above that. Thanks for your indulgence.
Mark, you can get together with Angela and see if you can make yours work into hers, just saying. But,
which would be more effective?
Well, it's up to you and her to talk. So, Councillor Paula.
Keep it as it is. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Just a couple of questions that are left over. First of all, the eyesight provides for the sale of our branded goods, doesn't it? All the Hamilton products too?
Yeah, they might be run out by now. I'm not sure if there's much in the way of stock left. But I'm not sure. But they sell Hamilton umbrellas and hats, and yep, they do.
Are we stopping the Hamilton brand?
No, I'm just not sure if we're renewing the stock for that. I'd have to check. I'd have to find out.
Why would we not renew the stock if we still have the brand?
Well, I'm not sure. I just want to check that out.
Anyway, I just in terms of if we keep that brand and they do restock, that's a role that they play in branding Hamilton in that respect. Was this proposal, because this is one of those proposals that came to us a little bit by surprise and late in the piece, was there any consultation with Hamilton Waikato Tourism, given that they have a connection, B, the tourism operators across Hamilton, and C, the eyesight itself? Were they involved in any pre-consultation about this proposal?
No, this proposal came out of the Mayor's recommendation. So when I became aware of it, I advised the staff, and I did call some of the interested parties to give them, make them aware that this was happening. But at that stage, there hadn't been any consultation in advance on my part.
So I'm not talking about communication, I'm talking about engagement with them about the prospect. It's quite different going to them and saying, hey, have you heard? Were they actually involved in a strategic, engaged conversation about the future of eyesight?
I wasn't involved, so I can't answer that other than from my own perspective.
Mayor Andrew, did you engage them in any collaborative, community engagement around the future of eyesight prior to the proposal?
Community.
Did you go and talk with them in a meaningful? Well, no, I'm talking about going and actually consulting in a meaningful two-way way. Did you consult with any of them before you made this proposal?
I would have thought it would be out of order for the Mayor to talk to staff about possible shutdown of their department. I don't think that is the role of the Mayor to do that, and I think it would actually possibly put the organisation in a legally uncomfortable position when it comes to employment contract. I did go and talk to Tourism New Zealand, Hamilton Waikato Tourism, to the Chief Executive and to the Chair.
And their response was what?
I think I'll leave that for the Chief Executive who was at the meeting.
Yeah, so the mayor met with the chair and the chief executive. The chief executive pretty much explained some of the points that the GM raised today about the nature of an eyesight working with a network of other eyesights, and that they effectively gain their strength from their collaboration. So that was one aspect to it. The chair commented about the concerns, acknowledging the concerns in terms of the budget and the amount of money required to fund it, acknowledge the value in the eyesight brand, but also acknowledge that the chair would understood why the mayor was looking at it as a way of addressing savings.
Yeah, that's sort of a one.
She was quite taken back at the huge loss, and as a businesswoman, could totally see where we were heading.
Yeah, I suppose that's not the basis of my question, though. My basis is that did you engage in any strategic conversation, not about what the proposal was, but about the future of eyesight and how that might look? Did that happen? Do you understand what I'm saying?
Look, there was no strategic planning done in the context of other opportunities or other ways of delivering the eyesight brand or visitor destination services in Hamilton.
So they just had to respond to new information that came to them. Yeah, which is okay.
I mean, we've got a department that's losing $560,000 while they sell $360,000 worth of tickets.
With all due respect, Mayor Andrew,
That's total. That's not profit.
I'm just asking
total.
a question, and I'm not expecting a counter debate at this time. But
No,
I
but
look
do
forward
you
to your
understand
debate.
the answer to your question? Is they're losing us $560,000 while they sold a total of $360,000 worth of tickets. That's not commissions on tickets. That's a total of tickets.
I accept your view as a debate, but it's outside of my question. Thank you.
Councillor Ange.
Thank you. Sean, can you just give me a rough idea of what kind of tickets that we sell through eyesight? Yeah, no, I mean, like, to local shows, to tourism?
From an extreme point of view, we might sell an entire itinerary for someone visiting New Zealand. That's accommodation and transport, but generally speaking, it's local accommodation is the primary hit, and any advanced tickets, so admissions to Waitomo Caves, for example, tickets for Hobbiton, and bookings and the like. So it is more localised, or if someone wants to somewhere to stay the next night. So they're in Hamilton, hey, we're going to be in Taupo tomorrow night, can you help us with accommodation for there? That's the sort of thing they would do. In terms of the show tickets, what we do is try to promote for those people who want to walk in to pick up tickets themselves, or to purchase tickets over a counter. We're promoting everything that Hamilton has on that front, or just about everything, and then anything else. From time to time, they'll quite often sell tickets to shows in Auckland, so it's whatever's going off the system.
So it really is a one-stop shop for visitors to the city.
Yeah, I mean, an example of the ticketing, you're aware of the social media campaign we have called H Live, which is out there for everything, and we've made the eyesight dual purpose really to be the drop-in centre for H Live. We also, before the Founders closure, we had a ticket office that used to be staffed selling tickets at Founders Theatre. Before the closure, we actually closed that ticket office down so that it could just be a consolidated service down here rather than having it duplicated. So we've done things to try and extend the ticket sale, or any sales where we can, but as I say, the primary objective is the advisory service.
And that advisory service, other than from travel agents, wouldn't be provided any other way?
Well, you won't get travel agents providing that sort of local service, because if they can't sell and expend and get a attractive commission on that, they won't provide that advisory service.
Just in response, a question just for the CEO, following on from Councillor Southgate's question around the stakeholders and were they spoken to, and you said you had a meeting with the chair of Hamilton Waikato Tourism.
And the chief executive.
And the chief executive. Isn't it fair to say that it would be very difficult for them to take a strong opposition view to the proposal, given that they receive council funding?
No, I'll just reiterate again, they expressed concern. The Chief Executive outlined the similar points that the GM raised in terms of the value of the eyesight, in terms of the context of the network and the fact they collaborate together and launch each other, which is implying that if it wasn't there, they would be concerned.
Okay, that's clearer. Thank you.
Sorry, my apologies.
Thank you. Sean, my amendment asks you to look at any additional revenue streams, and you've said, look, that's going to be a challenge. But it also asks you to look at alternative business models and report back next year. Can you just give me a really high level idea of what are the kinds of things you might look at?
In terms of revenue streams, it's I mean, I've been looking at it both from terms of revenue, but also enhanced service and delivery. And I've sort of described some areas where we've added the service requirement of the operation to basically to add value, in my view, to the city and add value for council. So, in terms of what else can we sell, you know, it's a challenge for us to try and sell more of what we currently already do, and I really have to investigate that. I'm always conscious, just as we are with our other other businesses where we have a chance to generate revenue to offset cost, of not encroaching too much on private sector type activity. So when the manager talks about the idea of, you know, hire bikes and everything else, it's great, quite a cool idea actually. But I'd hate to be encroaching on someone else, saying, hey, we're stealing someone else's business or whatever. So we do have to take a bit of care, but I'm definitely very open-minded to finding new ways to do it. In terms of the new business model, I've suggested that we really should talk to our partner councils, and Hamilton Waikato Tourism would assist with this a lot with their own strategy work that they're doing, to say, hey, overall, is there a better way for the eyesight model for all of us? But in terms of finding a private operator, a private company, we just have to investigate where is there an integrated benefit that could be achieved. So I don't have any bright ideas off the cuff for you, but very keen to pursue it.
And in terms of looking for new way, an alternate business model off the top of your head, what kinds of things would you look at there?
Well, that's the sort of thing, the thing I just described. You know, is there a way for us to get better combination of eyesights for the Waikato region, and can we find rationalisation across the network as it currently stands? Now that might be challenging for some areas because it might mean a closure in some towns in lieu of faith and trust that the remaining eyesights will do more, and therefore can that consolidate revenue better in order to defray the core costs? I don't know. It's just that whole, is there a rationalisation opportunity?
And in the 600-odd thousand that it costs to operate, how much of that is overhead? Just roughly?
To give you an idea, the personnel cost runs at around $360,000. Our rent, as I said before, is around $87,000, and you add another $20,000 for utilities. And then we have marketing of $30,000. We have user charges, you know, in terms of council's IT, which sort of bring it up to around $570,000 in terms of cost. The below the line charges, however, that we often talk about or don't talk about, the depreciation is minimal because it has very little equipment. It's only around $6,000. Yeah. However, there is an overhead allocation charged against the business of $285,000 to go towards council's overhead costs.
Yeah, that's something I've always fundamentally disagreed with, how we do that. So that overhead that we lump onto eyesight is $250,000.
Yeah, but that is on top of the figures that are in this paper, because all those indirect costs have been excluded. So all you're seeing is the net operating costs here.
Okay, thank you.
So are you saying the 250,000 is on top of the 560?
Yeah, that's the internal recharge that is imposed, that is allocated to that business. So if the business were to cease to exist, that 250,000 odd would have to be swallowed up in some other way.
So it's actually $800,000, nearly $1 million a year it's costing us.
Well, that's, as I say, if you were to...
Yeah, I understand.
To ask if that 250,000, you could attribute it this, and this as the result of eyesight being there, you'd find it very hard to identify where it sits. So what I'm saying is it's very difficult for me to know, if you close the eyesight, where will that saving be found for that additional money anyway? It's the same as when we closed the theatres down, same as Founders. We're still paying a big charge on Founders even though it's closed. So you still don't know where that savings to be found.
Councillor Jeff.
Thanks, Mayor Andrew. Sean, but based on your experience, and this is a difficult question, I know, what, if any, impact would opting out of eyesight have on visitor numbers to Hamilton?
I don't think it would have a huge impact on actual visitor numbers, but it would have a big impact on, I believe, in terms of whether or not how people felt about how easy they found the city to be, how welcoming they found the city to be. You know, they will be used to being able to get good information and advice from other eyesights, those people that use eyesights, I should say, and there are a lot of there's a big chunk of the market who don't use them, but there's a big chunk that do want them. So they will notice the fact that there is nothing here. The tourism industry at large will say, well, that's interesting. Hamilton's the only place in the country that doesn't have an eyesight, and that, to be honest, will actually be a reputational issue for the city. I can't put my hand on heart and say there will be fewer visitors. I would just argue as to whether the level of the experience or the welcome feeling would be sustained. And I know it's a lot of cost to put on that type of an argument. I accept that.
Deputy Mayor Martin.
How many visitors do we get through the eyesight each year? Actually, the physical visitors?
Around 40,000.
So how many? That's how many dollars per visitor? I'm trying to do my maths.
Yeah, look, it's if I could just say it's not a lot in terms of dollars, but if I could just say, the whole premise of the eyesight is not to sell tickets. Is to be welcoming and to give advice and information to travellers who want it, is to help. The purpose is to help people. The reason we sell tickets is to add to that help and, you know, follow it through, but also to try and cut our costs back a bit.
But if we have 40,000 visitors and there's $500,000 it cost us,
yep.
Help me with my maths student.
Oh, sorry, I beg your pardon.
I wasn't your maths.
Sorry, I beg your pardon.
$15 loss a person.
So we're sort of the $10.
$10 a person. Yeah.
$10 a person is sort of, we write the cheque. The other thing is, how has anyone done an investigation of cost structure at other sort of comparable eyesights for cities around New Zealand? I'm just trying to work out if there's any golden...
Look, I'm not aware of any, but I think that is definitely an exercise that would be worth looking into, and certainly Councillor Pascoe suggested that earlier on as well.
Because it does seem quite excessive if you're looking at $10 per, $12 per person to go in the door. The other thing is, when we had it in the bus station, could someone tell me why, if I remember, it was there, and then it moved. Why was it there, and then why did it move?
Look, I can't answer that question.
And how much did it cost us in the bus station?
I can't answer that question, but the cost, I'm sure the rental, I'm not sure the arrangement that was in place at the transport area. But once again, as I've said, the rental of where we are now is not. It's you know, around $87,000. Whether the bus station was 40,000 or 20,000, I don't know. But my understanding was that the shift was a part of the fact that the eyesight operation simply wasn't working that well and wasn't well located for visitors. And that, you know, despite the fact that it's a transport centre. So the view at the time, as it's been conveyed to me, was that it was much better off to be in Garden Place, which is more of a focal point, and also because the eyesight attracts people to the location because that's where they want to go. It was a way to get people into the heart of Hamilton.
And there's a fabulous staff down there, and you go and order tickets, and I can understand the, you know, even the local service and all of that. But I'm just trying. The 500 seems a lot.
As I said before, the bulk of that is made up of the cost of staff. So we have 9 or 6.5 full-time equivalents, and the cost of staff is a primary cost, so followed by the rent.
So, yeah, and so
and that stuff, sorry if I may, is spread out over a 7-day-a-week roster. It's not a 5-day-a-week roster.
Sure. So if the break-even amendment was, you know, if you presume that would involve you in looking at every other site in the country, presumably. I mean, there must be some models.
Yeah, there's probably half a dozen eyesites that I'm aware of that make a profit, and that's largely to do with the location where they are. And if you're in Queenstown and you're an eyesight and you can sell 100 jet boat rides a day, you're in pretty good shape.
Oh, sure, but even I think even the aspiration, without being any way disrespectful of the team and the staff, our great staff down there, how could we close that? It's $500,000 a year.
I think you will find that is probably on par with any eyesight operation around the country in a bigger city of our size. In terms of some eyesights obviously have non-tourism things that they do, and this comes back to Councillor O'Leary's questions about are there other things we can do. I heard the other night about one eyesight that sells a printed telephone directory, advertising, and they do other supplementary work in order to help pay their way. So, you know, there's all sorts of options there. But I know in Auckland, for example, I know they have 4 or 5 eyesites dotted around Auckland, that it's always a vexing question for them to say this is a big investment or a big cost to us up front to provide that service for the city's visitors.
I think in the review, it's kind of what for us to fully understand it, what is the bare minimum to keep the eyesight franchise to, and you know, obviously we want to know what exactly.
The bare minimum at the end of the day is around staffing. To be part of that consistent eyesight service, 7-day-a-week operation, and you need X number of staff to do that.
Very good quality.
So you do need to, you know, you can't necessarily just go down to only having one person by themselves, you know, from 9 to 5 or whatever on Saturdays and Sunday. You know, it just and any business has this challenge, and retailers have this challenge hugely. At what stage do you know, can you be any less than 2 people at any one point in time?
There's a predictor, obviously, during the week of your customer. Just okay. The final question.
Excuse me.
Sorry.
A lot of the questions getting repetitive. GM, you're being very long in your answers. Keep your questions short and precise, and your answers on track, please.
Final, very precise question. Events like the Sevens and the field days, what role does eyesight actually play?
So for the Sevens, the eyesight is basically the go-to centre for the event, for people coming to the event. As I said before, they'll get their EWAP bands there for ticketing. They've already been a centre for a lot of people to go to for assistance with accommodation. For the Mystery Creek Field Days, they actually do coordination of the bus shuttle services there, and they sell tickets for Mystery Creek as well, for admissions, advanced admissions and so forth, but they coordinate the transport logistics as well.
Thank you, that's important.
So we are holding bands for people who go into the Sevens. Is this just a...
It's just a value
service.
It's a service, and it's purely because the.
So why aren't the Sevens doing that through their own tickets and through on their own budget instead of doing it on our budget?
Well, they are doing it. All I'm saying is that as a part of what we do to help major events happen and so forth, if we can provide some help with any of our existing resources, we do. I'm not putting on extra staff. I'm not putting on extra rosters. I'm not putting on extra cost. I'm quite keen to get a good reason for people to go to the eyesight, though, in case we can sell them something, a Hamilton cap or whatever. But all I'm saying is with our existing resource, if they have capacity to help the organiser out with getting wristbands done in advance of the game itself and on the day of the game, why wouldn't we? It's a part of what we do to try and make the major events happen and make Hamilton an easy place for them to come and have a major event and do things. So all I'm doing is deploying the resource I already have. I haven't got that resource to do that job. I just happen to have it and it's available. So I'm trying to make the most out of it, and that's that value-added service that I talked to you before.
My understanding was is that the Sevens, we made the stadium available and they did their own thing with their own staff. And I just struggle to see why we would, and I struggle to see why somebody would walk across town to go to the eyesight to pick up their band when they go into the game.
Well, this is in advance of the game days. So it's just to save people's time when they go there. It's, for the week before the game, if they're already here or whatever, and there's going to be an event in Garden Place
Sorry, I understand
the night
that.
before.
Sorry, Sean. Yeah, I get it. Okay, Councillor Mark.
Thank you. Sean, I want to ask you some questions around the potential with the eyesight proposition at the moment. So with regards to local accommodation, if people are coming here to look for a motel or a hotel, what's the relationship with the local moteliers and eyesight other than just having brochures in the stands?
Oh, well, the eyesight has a booking system, and the motels are all locked and loaded, or a lot of them are, I should say, on that booking system, so they can book in directly.
Right.
Or they actually phone the motels up. So usually the eyesight, apart from individuals that come in and say, hey, where should I stay?
Yeah.
Because they don't want to drive up and down and look at all the
vacancy sites,
which is the main reason. They're quite often used as a centre for, hey, we're struggling to find anywhere, can you help us?
Right.
And they have a good idea on inventory in terms of what's available, what's not. They do a huge amount of work with field days every year to help people find places, and they actually act as a repository for the motels. Quite often when there's a high peak zone, the motels will let them know, hey, this is where there's some availability.
So potentially, because I know Trivago and all those sites do a very, very similar service, but is there potential in a more interactive model with local moteliers where you can get a better deal through eyesight than you can even on Trivago or anywhere like that? Is that potential for growth?
You're getting into a very different zone. Don't forget that if you're dealing with an accommodation consolidator, there are high commissions involved, and also there's only certain allocations involved. So you might be able to book a hotel at Novotel through Trivago, for example, but you've probably only got access to a limited number of those rooms.
Right.
Whereas the eyesight, can deal direct.
Okay. Thank you. The bike hire thing, I was interested in that one. Who else is offering that service? Because I know that councils all around the world have a bike hire service, and I would have thought eyesight would be the logical place.
Look, I don't have it. It's early days,
of course,
and I think the gardens are looking at including a couple of bikes as well. So.
Which is us anyway, isn't it?
Yeah. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So would it be advantageous to have bike hire in town and at the gardens?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay. No, they look. The eyesight and the gardens, and the museum and the zoo, they all work in quite closely. On a number of occasions. They're always in contact with each other and supporting each other.
You've identified that the market for it is predominantly visitors to Hamilton, but are there opportunities in broadening it out to be a local information centre for local?
Yes, there are, and we just have to actually get around to having that discussion to say, hey, what else can we do? And it's something that Kelvin and I have talked about from time to time. We need to sit down and actually work through what are things that can be done. I mean, I've even raised from time to time, can it be used as a display centre for some of the new development zones? For example, there's no reason for us not to use that facility. I've raised, on Saturdays and Sundays, can it receive rate payments?
Right.
For people. So we're very open, as I say, to add value to our services.
Oh, I see. So you're saying when the council doors are closed, you could be Okay, that's interesting. And is how wide can you go under the Eyesight brand with those other offerings, or do you have to finally say, right, Eyesight, we're parking you, we're going to be a local Hamilton information centre?
I think you need to, if you're just saying we are just going to be Hamilton-centric and nothing else, you walk away from the Eyesight brand. But there's nothing stopping you having the Eyesight operation and branding, but do other things as well.
Right, okay.
At all.
Yeah. And that's one thing I was asking, if you... Oh, no, I'll save that for debate. Thanks. Yep.
So if we can have the Eyesight branding and do other things as well, why can't we bring the Eyesight branding into reception?
We can. All I'm saying is that to do that, you've got to bring the full suite of service that's required of an Eyesight in order to do that. And as I said before, there was discussion a few years ago, before I was involved, about locating the Eyesight in the reception area, and my understanding it was a lack of space availability that stopped it. Otherwise, the idea was to bring it in. But to do so, you're going to bring all the costs in with it. Yes, you'll save some rent and a few other auxiliary things, but you're still going to bring the cost of staffing. You'll have a reception area open 7 days a week as opposed to 5 as it currently is. So you can do it. It's just a matter of making it work. But the cost of doing so will still come with it.
Councillor Gary.
Thank you. Thanks, Sean. Do you know what you get when you go to Google and say things to do in Hamilton? You get the Waikato Caves, Hamilton Gardens, Waikato Museum, Hamilton Zoo, Lake Rotorua, Classics Museum, Rotorua, beg your pardon. You then have a little button you push and it goes to another screeds of things to do in Hamilton. Gower Park, Waiwhakariki, Kirikiriroa Park, Pa. Then I just scroll up with one finger and there's the top 10 things to do and places to go in Hamilton, TripAdvisor, things to do in Hamilton and Waikato, 10 free or cheap things to do in Hamilton, top 10 things to do in Hamilton, Lonely Planet Guide, top 20 things to do in Hamilton from $22, attractions, activities, visit Hamilton.
Point of order, Mr Chair. I think this is the wrong time for Councillor Mallett to be touting for a job as a tour guide.
And do you know how much that costs the ratepayer of Hamilton?
Well, the Eyesight staff actually populate that information into the website, so that's the source of the website information. The Marketing Communications Department of Council coordinate the website, and we use the Eyesight staff to load the data and the images, and they get the updated information from all the various vendors and operators.
So this is from Google.
We're using their labour to populate all those different sites. And
so how much time do you think? How much time do you think the staff would do on that?
Oh, look, I couldn't tell you, but it's.
Would that be an hour a week, or?
Probably 2 or 3 hours, maybe 4 hours a week. Okay. I honestly don't know the answer to that question, but
it's quite a bit less than $500,000 a year, eh?
Yeah, but I'm just saying that's part of. They do a lot of stuff. They do a lot of things that are behind the scenes. They populate the same with Hamilton Waikato Tourism website, and then that knocks on to Tourism New Zealand website. So they do enter that data.
And of course, no one has to come into the city to get this information. They can just do it from their hotel bedroom or anywhere, can't they?
That's correct.
Yeah. Okay. So that's what the Eyesight's competing against. Because I assume people can book hotels, book tickets, all sorts of stuff on here, can't they?
Yeah.
And they get advice and they get all sorts of stuff from here.
From there, that's right.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to debate. So, firstly, I want to make it very clear that this is in no way a reflection on our Eyesight staff. They do a fantastic job. Eyesight's the only franchise that I'm aware of where you join up to lose money. I think there's possibly out of the 40 odd through our country, there's probably half a dozen that actually make money. They're owned by people like Shot Over Jet, obviously Hobbiton makes money, Auckland will make money, but I presume, but generally they lose money. It's the model that I'm bringing into question. I'm not suggesting that we don't have a information and tourism Hamilton advisory service that welcomes our guests and gives them advice. I'm suggesting that we move it in with amalgamated in with our existing ground floor services, so that our staff on the ground floor are up to speed. It won't cost anything to refit the counter. People like Hobbiton, the people like the Caves will come in and train those staff, as they do with our eyesight at the moment, take them on weekend trips, day trips, put them in hotels, take them on their activities to show them how it all works, as you would expect with a tourism an organisation that was training the tourist people. And they will be up to speed, and they will be a part of all of this, and they will be able to pass on the information. There'll also be our map information racks in places like Hamilton Gardens, at the bus stop, in our library, so that people can come upstairs, up to speed. But the smartphones has changed the whole game. I used to travel and used to use the equivalent of eyesights overseas. I don't anymore. It's all on my phone. I book my tickets on the phone. I find my hotels on my phone. And the game's changed very quickly in the last 5 years. It's been a major change. Is this a core service? I don't think so. The GM's told us that he would struggle to find any revenue uplift for eyesight. And as I say, it has come out in this discussion that it's not costing us $560,000. There's another $250,000 from inside the organisation that is attributed to it as well, which takes the loss to over $800,000. So, and my last point is that I expect that the GM will bring all full-time staff from eyesight and will bring them into our organisation. So that is an expectation that I have, should this go through. Thank you. Councillor Mark. No. Sorry, Ange is the mover of the amendment.
Thank you, Mayor Andrew. I disagree with you when you said a lot of people join things, pay money to join something to lose money. A lot of people join gyms and lose money as well. Look, if this was just a move to simply move eyesight as it is into the ground floor, I might be less opposed to it, but it's not. Eyesight is an international brand that's recognised all over the world and widely by visitors to New Zealand. It is the first face, official face, that people see. It is our welcome mat, it is our welcome to Hamilton, and the closure of eyesight would send the message that that New Zealand's fourth largest city is not interested in being part of an internationally recognised brand, and we're not interested in welcoming our visitors. $109 million of tourist money throughout New Zealand is directly attributed to eyesights. Why on earth would we not want to play our part in contributing to that? And as we've heard from the General Manager, this is not just about providing a service to visitors and tourists. It is a welcome mat. It's actually part of the experience. When I visited Te Aroha and did the Hauraki Rail Trail last Christmas, the first place that my group of 15 people went was their eyesight, and it was great, and we learnt all about the area and we got all of the information that we need. And our visitors come to Hamilton and they find out about the zoo, they find out about shopping and eating opportunities in Hamilton, and of course they find out about our Hamilton Gardens, although that might be less enticing now that there's a proposal to charge. For visitors, particularly our international visitors, eyesights are actually the first point of contact. They are. They are our Hamilton face. They are us saying hi and welcome. This is what we've got. This is what Hamilton's got. This is what the region's got. This is our happy face. This is our welcome face. So let's please keep that welcome mat out. Let's keep the face-to-face human contact with our visitors. Let's not replace it with a brochure stand in the council building.
Councillor Mark.
Thank you, Mayor Andrew. Our Hamilton plan says that Hamilton aims to be a great river city to live, work, play and visit. And the first thing we do is shut down the visitor centre. Doesn't make sense to me. Now, there are 4 ways, and thank you, Mayor Andrew, for pointing out that this is losing a lot of money. And yep, I think we ought to do something about that. And there are 4 things we could do, and it's the same as with any business. If you're trying to turn any business around, you've got 4 options. You can either cut costs, which I believe should be our last option. You can either get more customers, you can either get more return visits from those customers, or you can get more value from each individual customer. Basic laws of business. More customers, more return visits, or more return per visit. And there are so many opportunities in here that just through a very simple line of questioning with Sean, we've identified. Eyesight strikes me as a very versatile brand that we can do a lot around. I think there's a lot of potential in branding Hamilton gear and turning those 40,000, hopefully more people in that come in into more money. Sell them stuff while they're there. Yes, it is a great service. It's a fantastic service. And I will say, I travelled around America too, and I use my phone all the time. That's absolutely fantastic. But Google doesn't give you the opportunity to upsell. The only people that make money off the Google proposition are Google advertisers and Google themselves. We need to be actively dragging people into this venture to upsell them while they're there, making more out of each customer who comes through. Opportunities could improve, I beg your pardon, I'll speak in favour of Angela's and James's amendment, but we've got another one ready to go just in case that fails. Opportunities could include rebranding, moving it, making a far better value proposition, bike hire, a better relationship with local accommodators, and a local information centre, and moving our customer base away from just the visitors, but to be a more local information centre. More people in there means more opportunities to make money. I would love to turn this thing around and see it make money before we start to look at throwing an axe through it.
Councillor Paula.
I'm much more inclined to work with and alongside stakeholders than to do to stakeholders and have them react. So I've been a bit uncomfortable with this, and hence my questions about were they consulted and engaged with prior, and that just doesn't seem to have happened. Not everything we do is about money, because we do need on occasions to think about the wider benefit that we bring to our community, and the previous speakers have talked to that. I'm particularly warmed by the ambassadorial branding value that the Eyesight brings, and yes, it is a well-trusted and well-known brand. And I think this is very complementary to the fact that Hamilton is trying to put itself on the map for more visitors with our river improvements, with our fantastic Hamilton Gardens, potentially with the improvements to the zoo. We're going to get more people coming to Hamilton and to visit us, and we need to be really good ambassadors. And those people who work there are not just those people who work there are trained specialists in the tourism industry. That's what they are. And they do exactly what Mark says. They do sell tourism packages and experiences. Look, I must be delightfully old-fashioned, really, because yes, I do use Trivago from time to time. Sometimes I book the odd small airfare online as well, and sometimes I go to the travel agent. But whenever I do travel, I like to see a real person. I don't always want the faceless experience. I want a connected, personal experience in the city that I travel to. And yeah, like to engage with and get some enthusiasm from them about what I might see and why I might go there. And they know lots of things, like what could I fit in a particular period of time? If I can only do one thing, should I do this one or that one? And they've got lots of local knowledge, and that's what we want. And we've talked about ambassadors for Hamilton. Let's not get rid of a set of our really excellent ambassadors.
Councillor Jeff.
Thanks, Mayor Andrew. I understand what you're trying to do. I understand you're trying to cut costs, and as I have in a couple of areas myself, but I'm sorry, with respect, there's an element of cowboy about this proposal. I can't support something which straight away, bang like that, is going to make Hamilton the only city and probably there's plenty of towns. One of the few places without an eyesight. I don't think it makes sense for the stage where Hamilton is at the moment. For a growing city with any sense of ambition whatsoever to get rid of the eyesight at this point in time, I just don't think it makes sense. You know, there's a lot of investment going in to make Hamilton a decent place to visit. The gardens, you know, the Gardens Festival, the river plan. You know, you've got Te Awa Lakes, which is going to spend $1 billion if it all goes according to plan. I just don't think it makes sense to suddenly, with a stroke of a pen, go bang, that's it. I think the amendments at least signal that there are issues, but they prevent us from just making a decision, because I think this has been too sudden, and the amendments prevent a knee-jerk reaction where we say, right, it's closed. It sends a signal that we want some work done pretty quickly on trying to make the eyesight more viable, and so it gives it a stay of execution, I suppose. It gives it a chance, gives it a window where we can see what can be done, which I think is only fair. So it signals change, but it doesn't throw the baby out with the bathwater, which I think is what we would be doing if we supported this today. Thanks.
Councillor Leo.
Realise, of course, is that an eyesight is a service to the community, and it is a service to the travelling public. With 43,000 walk-through people, that actually equates to 827 people per week who actually go through that eyesight down there. When you look at Cambridge has got one, Te Awamutu's got one, Tirau's got one, Matamata, Te Aroha, Morrinsville, Huntly and Raglan, they've all got eyesights. And here we are, the biggest city within the Waikato, and what we're considering is closing the place down. Maybe we could actually put it into the council building here, and maybe some of the cashiers and that down there could be trained up. But I still think you need a certain expertise as far as the tourism industry is concerned. Tourism is one of our greatest growth areas, along with dairying in the country, and I think what we have to do is promote it as much as we possibly can.
Councillor Siggy.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, look, I mean, we've travelled around the world, and it is a really interesting. The world's changing, and our kids they look at us when we look for an information centre, and it is that different. That's why I asked about what age group is going to walks today into eyesight, but there's still lots of young people also would love to talk to somebody. So it is a great way to introduce visitors, whether they're from overseas or just from Wellington, to our city, and with, like everybody said, what's coming, what's on our books, what's happening in Hamilton. We are just growing in some of the areas where we can even invite more people into the city and make it more exciting. I understand you, Mayor Andrew, about saving money, and I totally get that, and I do believe that we have to look at different models. Look, if the council entrance would be much nicer, I think it looks like a bunker. It would be nice, you know. Then I could see the eyesight in there. But if I could just make another suggestion, when we do look at the library, and not only just have a cafe there, but also have the eyesight there, because I know lots of what we always look for is an information centre with a cafe really close by, like next door. And then we can look at the brochures and enjoy, and then go back again and ask more questions. And so that might be something we could look at in the future. But we do need to look at maybe a different business model, or some way of saving some money, because like you said, you don't normally get into a franchise to lose money. So I totally agree with you on that. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Martin.
Yeah, thank you. As you know, I always enthusiastically second all of the Mayor's motions, and very enthusiastic, of course, always. But I will probably be going for the... Can you scroll up the notice of amendment, Madam Governance? So it seems to me, so there is...
Can I just point out, sorry, Deputy Mayor, that the foreshadowed
motion, but obviously
that's not on the table at the moment.
That will influence my vote. because obviously I know that if the amendment goes down, then we go to the next amendment. So would you scroll it back, please? Because it is up on the table. It is with respect foreshadowed, and that the Bunting-Taylor motion is a sort of a more hard-headed motion. I don't necessarily know if it will be achieved, but it does set some parameters in my view. I think this debate has been extremely useful, and I thank the Mayor for his initiative in introducing this debate, because, you know, what's ironic, when we have Waikato Tourism come and ask for an increase in grant and say how little we spend, what I want in the future is just to have the debate where we have the eyesight money and the tourism money, because obviously that means that ordinary ratepayers in this city are spending over $1 million to promote tourism and visitors, and that's fine. I want to make sure that those who are the direct financial beneficiaries, and we've talked about bed tax, this, that and the other, you know, obviously they are getting the accommodation and the hospitality sector are getting $1 million of ratepayer funding put into, and that improves the economy, and I know all of that. So I think this, and I thank the Mayor, because I think this debate has been very, very useful and very illustrative, and I must admit I hadn't given it too much thought as to the total package we spend, but it just seems to me that financially we can close the gap on what the eyesight is costing us.
Councillor Gary.
Thank you. I think this is just one of the easiest decisions that we will address in this 10-year plan, and it astounds me that everyone seems to be going the other way. This is clearly an obsolete delivery model. As I said, you can get everything you want on the Google, Mr. Google, anywhere, anytime, for free. I've heard people waxing lyrical, and it's not even particularly enjoyable listening to it, some of it, that some of you honestly are in la-la land. Just off, with one hand you're desperately trying to pretend to the ratepayers you're trying to save them money, you're doing all sorts of virtue signalling, and yep, I'm going to keep the rates down, I'm going to keep the rates down. When it comes push to shove, you haven't got the guts. You haven't got the guts. So, and I can say I don't think this is going to get through, unfortunately, but that's the way I see.
Councillor Dave.
The thing I find most interesting about this debate is the fact that it's taken the Mayor's suggestion that we cut the eyesight operation to suddenly have coming out of the woodwork all these different ideas about how we can cut costs and save money. So congratulations, number one, to the Mayor for actually raising the issue, because I think if you've looked at our books at all for the last few years, you would have seen the same problem. It's not new. It hasn't been making, it's been losing a bucket load regularly. We've known that, and no one's really come to the party with any ideas. There's been, I mean, the bike hire idea, I'm sure I've heard that for a while, but I think it's been, you know, Councillor Bunting's forgotten to turn the electric motor on his e-bike on because it's been going so slowly uphill, that particular idea. You know, where's the work been to make it more viable if people think that it needs to be made more viable? And, you know, I'm as guilty of that as any of the others. But, you know, and suddenly someone suggests the whole thing be cut, and then we all of a sudden, oh, no, we can't do that. Do a study here, do a study there, and make sure nothing goes anywhere. In the meantime, we keep losing that $500,000 a year. You know, where has that serious look as its costs been? And I say that to management as well as to councillors. Looking at all the motions up there, I'm in Councillor Gallagher's camp. I think that the slightly harder review option is Councillor Taylor's foreshadowed amendment and Bunting's. And, you know, I think that gives a definite time within which it has to come back, which is shorter than the other one for sure. Give it a little bit more rigour. I would hate to see eyesight just stop as it is now and nothing else happen. I think we have to decide what else could happen and how else it might be able to be funded. So my suggestion to the meeting is that you actually vote against this amendment, and which will allow the Taylor Bunting amendment to come forward and actually be voted on. You won't be able to vote on your amendment unless that happens. So I'm recommending that councillors vote against the amendment and vote for the foreshadowed motion amendment when it becomes an amendment, even though I'm not supposed to be talking like that, I don't think.
Can I ask a procedural question to the governance manager? Can you just clarify, obviously we do have a foreshadowed amendment. If this amendment was adopted, put the current one up, the O'Leary amendment, then do I take, if I think I'm right, that then the meeting can entertain a further amendment or not? How does that work?
In the event that the Councillor O'Leary's amendment is lost, the foreshadowed amendment can be put.
What about if if the O'Leary amendment is successful?
Becomes the substantive motion, and at that point another amendment may be put.
Right, so basically you can have your cake and eat it. Yeah, it's all right now, it's all right.
Okay, I'll take my right of reply. The amendment is as weak as water. The amendment basically is a fob off and makes you feel good, but you're actually doing nothing. And we'll sit here in 3 years' time and ISOT will be losing somewhere between $500,000 and $1 million like it is now, year on year on year. There'll be another $2.5 million that would have gobbled up by then. I'm not proposing shutting down our information, tourism and advisory service. I'm saying pick it up, move it into reception and save somewhere between $500,000 and $800,000 a year. That's what I'm saying. We're sitting here in a challenging situation where we're trying to save money. We've got a straightforward way here to save money. We're still going to have a service, but you're taking the easy way. And finally, I'd just like to say I'd love to be a cowboy, but I'm not. Let's go to the vote, no talking. So we're voting on the amendment. Sorry, I made a mistake. That's my mistake. I made a mistake. Sorry. Can we go again? Sorry about that.
Redoing the same vote, Councillor Turman. Same vote again. Councillor Andrew's amendment.
No talking, please.
The amendment is lost, 547 against.
You are now able, Councillor Bunting, to put the motion that you earlier foreshadowed.
This amendment up, we don't need to re-debate that, do we?
No, I'd like you just to talk to it, Mark. Please.
Oh yeah, I'll absolutely talk
Yourself.
to it. Yes, I will speak to this, thank you. It is very, very similar to the excellent amendment that was on before from Angela and James, in that it does give the eyesight a stay of execution. It acknowledges a wee bit more strongly the Mayor's concerns that it is losing money, and I think it will kick us into action to make this a really great proposition. With regards to Gary's comments earlier on, yep, cutting costs is not the only way to turn something around. I think this has got potential, and this gives us time to explore the potential while still keeping that value proposition open to visitors and potentially Hamilton residents as well. So I'd encourage people to go for this amendment and keep eyesight where it is and make it even better.
May I ask a question through you of the mover?
Yes, because it's a new subject.
How does the mover and seconder, how do the mover and seconder propose to reflect any change arising from B in the long-term plan?
Yeah.
Where, you know, if there is a break-even result, at what stage is that going to kick in the LTP?
Well, I guess the idea is that we have a finite time that the opportunities come back with costings and potential benefits. So
your
whether it's
finite
task force
time
or-
is the same time as the LTP is due to start.
Yeah, and the intention of this one is to keep this open. There's no doubt about it, but to be more nimble with what we do with it. So the assumption is that this will stay open for the 10 years, or for the next 10 years. But
Yeah, but when does the break-even result, which is the financial term, when does that actually appear in the budget? In other words, when does the $500,000 loss cease?
Yep.
And being an operational cost, and a zero replace it, approximately.
Realistically, I would imagine.
I want to know what the effect. It's a budgetary motion, but the effects at the moment aren't defined for our LTP discussion.
So until such time we've done the work, I suggest we don't include it in the 10-year plan. It won't be done in time to impact on the first year to affect it anyway. So that's where we've got the big rates increase. And if we do get it in time, we can revisit it at the first annual plan, Councillor McPherson, to include it there. Because otherwise, I think we're just going to be putting forward information that we haven't actually justified it. And despite the fact that the GM's up to the challenge, he has signalled that it will be a challenge. So we just need to make sure we work through it without cooking our lunch too soon.
So it would be fair to say that the early zero would appear on that line would be year 2.
Through the annual plan process.
Yeah.
Bearing in mind if this goes through, the base 10-year plan does have savings already loaded into it, which will have to get reversed out, which will have an impact. So at the moment, the savings of $500,000 has been baked into the budget. By resolving this, we put those costs back into the 10-year plan and leave them there for the duration of the 10-year plan.
So it would increase the current budget for year 1 by $500,000-ish.
That's correct. Ish, 550, thank you. Yep.
But hopefully, potentially, have that good effect for the following years.
I hope so.
Yeah, same. Thanks. I've finished talking.
No, we're actually on questions.
Okay.
Gary, keep going. Gary, you're on.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, this is not debate, this is questions.
A question. Okay, so Mark, are you expecting the people who have been running the eyesight for the last 10 years at a loss to be the same people who are going to figure out how to get out of this loss? Because surely, if they've been running at a loss for the last 10 years, they would have done something about that.
Excuse me, Gary.
Beforehand.
I think that's
a question. Are you expecting?
No, stop. I think what Mark is asking is not the staff down in eyesight. They're doing their job well, and they're doing their job how they've been told to do it. It is a management issue to come back to us with this report, not the people in eyesight. They do a great job.
I said the people. I think I used the word people running it, which is the management.
It's the management that you need
the
to be
people who've
addressing.
been running it for 5 years or however long they've been doing it.
And that's exactly what the report is that we've asked to come back. That's management's job to come back to that report in 6 months' time, with ways that he's going to bring it in as a break-even operation.
So why would you think that the people who have been happy to run a $500,000 loss would be competent to turn that around?
Because they haven't had this motivation before.
So they haven't had the threat of losing their jobs before?
Perhaps.
Hang on.
I think we've got it within our organisation. I mean, I'm not putting it on the front desk staff around.
Hang on, Mark. Can you excuse me, Gary?
I'm just trying to find out why
stop,
you think...
Stop, please, Gary. I think we're going to go into debate here.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think these are questions which are really a debate to make us think and influence our vote. So rather than gather information, so I think we'll go into debate. Does anyone need to debate this again, or can we go straight to the board? You're welcome to if you want to. Just push your buttons. Okay, Councillor Dave. Hang on. I'll just give it to Mark first to debate because it's his amendment.
I'll be really, really quick. Again, this is a stay of execution for it's a jolly good reminder that we need to be nimble. I believe there is potential in this to actually return not a huge, but a profit if that's what's required to council. If not, I think we can run it virtually break even. I think there's a lot of potential in here in perhaps changing the focus of it from straight customer information centre, which, Gary makes a good point, it's under a new threat. But, you know, again, there are those 4 ways of improving business and only one of them is cutting costs. The other ones are getting more customers, more return visits and getting more return per visit. And I think this is a really great little venue to do so. Plus, I'd reinforce again that with the Hamilton plan, we've strongly signalled that we are open for business for visitors. And this sends a really bad signal, not to shut it down straight away.
Councillor Dave.
The thing that I hadn't picked up until the Chief Executive gave his answers to my questions before was that, unfortunately, because I like the thinking behind it, this amendment will involve an increase in budget for year 1 and perhaps not from thereafter, but certainly in year 1 of approximately $500,000, the amount of its loss. Whereas the budget that staff have been working that's been presented to us on behalf of the Mayor actually already has that amount of savings factored into it. It's assuming that the efficiency drive of senior management will deliver savings from this area as well as obviously other areas as part of the $5 million savings that's been proposed. So it sort of, to me, has become a no-brainer to support the support the motion, not the amendment now, because I would rather save the money immediately. And the proposal the staff are obviously working on is that they keep some form of eyesight going. Certainly, the Mayor has said, as the mover of the motion, that he doesn't believe that the eyesight logo and operation itself should happen in a different way in a different place, is what he's already said in the last debate. The Chief Executive has said he's already factored in the savings. This amendment would actually take them away. So I think it's an unintended consequence. Councillor Taylor's looking very puzzled there, but the Chief Executive clearly said that twice under questioning. So I don't want to vote for something that's going to add $500,000 to the already difficult budget we've got for year 1, I'm afraid.
Councillor Gary.
Thank you, and I echo Dave's concern about us ramping up the costs and therefore ramping up the increase for the 10-year budget. That's first one. The second one, we just have to accept, I think, that we are dealing with an obsolete delivery model. Now, it's not going to, you know, face-to-face retailing or whatever you call this thing is not going to disappear overnight, but it is being undercut because there are other models which are so much more successful, so much more efficient, so much more economical for the customer, who's the person we need to care about. And the customers are not us. There are 2 customers here. One is our ratepayers, who we're trying to save $500,000 for going on through the whole 10-year plan. Secondly, of course, they are the visitors who Mark's concerned about. They will get far more. They already, I assume, or I guarantee, are already going to that Google search, and they'll get everything they want on there. So I don't even know why we're trying to compete with that. Yeah, sure, we can sell I don't know how many T-shirts how many Hamilton T-shirts, or Tron or whatever they are, T-shirts or caps we sell, but that is infinitesimal to what we're dealing with here. We're talking about $500,000 of ratepayers' money, which we are just going to squander on an obsolete and on its way out business model. So it's really disappointing, given that we all know the financial situation we're in, that thing has to be debated.
Councillor Paula.
Thank you, Mayor Andrew. Look, I'm just going to say I think this is a fair result, this foreshadowed amendment, because I'm strongly opposed to slapping down new proposals without doing proper, engaged consultation with those who are going to be affected by it, but also those people who might know quite a lot about it. And I believe that's what's occurred here.
So I believe that we're pushing out the inevitable. The only way that we're going to break even is to bring it into our reception. And in the meantime, you're going to burn another $500,000 while we wait. Just bring this thing in, amalgamate it in as the proposal, as the motion says, and with our reception on the ground floor, and you will immediately do, and there's no way that I can see that you will immediately make this thing break even. Right of reply, Councillor Mark. Sorry, Mark. Sorry, there's no right of reply. So the democracy manager has just told me. So we'll go to the board. So we're voting now on the amendment.
It's carried, 7-4, 5 against.
So the amendment becomes a substantive motion. We're now voting on the motion, on the substantive motion.
The amendment is a substantive motion, declared carried, 10-4, 2 against.
So we're now going to...
Point of order, sorry. Point of order, I did get my vote wrong, sorry. I got my vote wrong.
That's all right, we're allowed to go back. Excuse me, nobody speaking, please. Nobody speaking.
Just give me 2 seconds because I was conferring with Mayor Andrew about the next one. So I understand Becca declared the outcome of the vote. There is no opportunity to re-vote once that's been declared. Thank you.
Okay, we're now going to page 318. We're stopping at 6 o'clock for dinner, or when it arrives around 6 o'clock. So page 318, it's a sale of endowment fund property.
Hello, Nicholas.
Report is read, if that's acceptable to you. I would just note that regardless of the decision on this matter today, we will still at staff level be bringing a report to sell these properties as business as usual in the first year of the new LTP in any case, because it coincides with the typical property cycle for these properties.
Okay, did everybody hear that? I'll just get you to repeat that because it's quite important to this matter.
Thank you. I simply said that I note that regardless of the outcome of your decision here in respect to this particular staff will still bring recommendations to sell these 2 properties to you as a business as usual matter in the first year of the LTP, so in the 2018-19 year. And the reason for that is that they are at the stage in their natural life cycle where they should be considered for sale.
Sorry, just give me a couple of minutes. I'll ask the democracy manager how we go about this on the strength of what I've just been told and on the strength that this doesn't affect the plan going forward. It has a positive effect on the plan, not a negative, that I pull this paper and we wait for the normal cycle for this to come back next year, which I confess I wasn't aware of until now. So
I mean, what Nicholas is talking about is a sale in year 1, if it's bought back, whereas what I undertake this to be talking about, understand I should say, is that it could be a sale in the current financial year that we're in now, before year 1 starts, which then has a different effect on on our finances, certainly on the debt level, doesn't it? You know, it affects the debt level from the start.
Yep, so this locked into the Mayor's budget put forward is the sale of these properties. So the
in which year?
It's effectively from year one, isn't it, Stephen? He's just double checking. So I'll get Stephen to come back. Year one. So year one, there's debt upside as a consequence of the sale, but also a increased deficit as a consequence as well, because the returns for the property is greater than the interest offset. So by selling them, we actually are in a worse off position. So if we don't put this proposal forward, we get a slight
income-wise.
We'll get a slight bump in income.
We're worse off income-wise. We're not worse off in debt.
Yep.
In our debt capacity.
Our debt's better, but we get an increased deficit.
So should we not be looking at those graphs to show us the difference, both to rates, which is a very small amount, presumably. Well, I don't know how small, and to debt, which is a little bit larger. It was 10 or $11 million difference. I mean, we've been doing that with other proposals.
Yeah, absolutely.
To pull it without having a look at the effect of that seems.
Yep.
Yeah, and I think the debt ratio is an important one for us to be looking at in this case, and the effects that it'll have on the plan.
Well, I'd still like to know the revenue change as well.
So the finance team of Stephen Halliwell is currently working through this.
Can we do it later? When we...
Stephen, would it make it easier for us to take this paper tomorrow instead of today when you've got your staff member back? So we want to show the impact of having this proposal in or out.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. So I'll just start with our starting position before we make this decision.
Have you put $500,000 in for eyesight?
Yeah, so I'm just making that adjustment. So 16.3%. So I'm going to focus just on the first year. Whether it's in for the 10 years or not, it doesn't change the first year decision. So at 16.3%, we balance the books in year one.
Yes.
So yeah,
That's that eyesight decision, I think.
so this is with the sale of the building in
Buildings.
So if we remove that out, there's $500,000 worth of it.
And I've just lost it. Where'd it go to? There it is. Sale of endowment. So that's with the sale of the endowment property in. Just confirming. And the debt levels
Drop.
are shown there. And we balance the books.
If you sell
The
that.
rates.
So I'll just confirm down
Oh, that's probably right.
the 2019 revised debt level is that number there, which is 463,016. So if I take that option out and go back to there, so 463,016 becomes 474.
A $9 million impact.
So the net impact is $9 million.
And on the debt to revenue, we just ever so slightly go under the debt to revenue on the debt to revenue graph over here.
Miles under. Miles
Balance
under.
budget graph, sorry.
Yep.
And so that would add.
Buildings maintained.
And I was shivering too.
So it sort of adds 0.1 to the interest to get that back to zero. 16.3 to 16.4.
16.4.
What's the balance improvement from keeping it over?
About $10 million.
No, not the debt. the, what do we get, what's the annual income revenue minus the interest?
So it's in the books here.
So there's about $9 million worth of revenue lost if we sell it.
Oh, I see, over the 10 years, 9 million. 900,000 a year.
Yeah, I roughly worked it out that basically by keeping it, we're better off per annum about $157,000 per annum.
Thanks.
And yep, so that was, I worked it out the first day we were planning to have this conversation sometime last week.
So for 3 years, you could pay for eyesight for 1 year.
No, it'd be about 4 years of all. Yeah, 4
If you
years.
that's keeping the buildings.
Would we have a credit on our depreciation when we sold? Will we sell it for more than the book value?
Investment properties get valued annually, so they don't get depreciated.
They get valued at what?
They get valued annually.
Okay.
So effectively, the depreciation's added back every year.
So we don't claim any depreciation on buildings? That surprises me,
Steve,
Chief Executive.
I like surprising you, Councillor Rob.
Yeah, I know
I'm trying to find our finance guy.
Well, the national government took that office, Rob.
No, that was for tax purposes. We still depreciate buildings. That was a tax deduction which doesn't affect us. So it's still appropriate from an accounting perspective to claim depreciation over assets that don't have, over buildings. And in our case, the tax issue isn't.
I don't have an answer to you off my head, sorry, Councillor.
But there will, if we sell it for more than what it's worth on our books, then we will have a credit, won't we, in the year or years of selling the two buildings, which will impact on our balancing the books.
Yep, but we revalue it every year. The buildings are, yeah.
Okay.
So, separate to whether we go ahead with this paper or not, Stephen, could you just give us an update of where we're actually at? Which I presume is what you've just done. So can you just go back to that again for us? So before we address this paper, just give us an update of exactly where we are.
So, with your proposal in, we're at 16.3% to balance the books. We have a slight decrease in our debt to revenue in the first few years, but then 2021 will remain a pinch point for us, depending on what we do there. Our debt has decreased ever so slightly. As a result of the decisions we've made.
I'm just saying what it is because it looks ever so slightly there, but
yeah.
It actually can be 10, 15 billion, can't it?
Yeah, so that is 463 million versus 400, so we reduced it by 2 million in year one. In 2022, 725 to 719, so it's 6 million. So we've added things in and taken things out. We've removed 700, bit hard to see on the screen, but I can see it in front of me. We've removed $76 million worth of revenue. We've removed $46 million worth of operating costs. We've reduced our interest expense by $518,000, and we've removed $28 million worth of capital. So that's the sum of the movements, I guess.
Of all the movements.
Of all the movements. It's interesting.
Sorry, I was just trying to.
If we look at our operating statement and compare it with the operating statement that's on page 58 of your report, that's the A3 fold-out. 2019 on page 58, we had budgeted for 328 million, and we're currently at 327 million, reducing about $600,000 worth of revenue, and that would pretty much be the $600,000 reduction in development contribution. contributions that we made in that first year. And then in the expenses, we originally budgeted 253.4 million, and we're currently at 253.5 million. So we've increased expenses by $100,000.
We agreed to stage the DCs in over 2 years, did we? I thought we didn't.
The CBD DC, we are staging that 50% in the first year.
Okay, I thought we didn't. Yeah. I thought that got lost.
I'll check in the tea break.
Okay. Okay, so I'm going to move a procedural motion that this item be adjourned for discussion meeting of the council prior to the 31st of August 2018. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Robb. No, you can't. You can ask Democracy for advice, but I'm sorry, once a procedural motion has been put, we can't talk. So I'll just read it again. We don't need to see it on the board, guys. Okay.
Is it?
Okay, we'll go to the board to vote.
Councillor Robb seconded it. Yeah.
We're just picking them at random now.
We're just spin the bottle.
Okay. Yep.
Thank goodness I don't have anything else to do.
The procedural motion is declared carried unanimously.
Okay, so we'll stop for dinner. Everyone's welcome, visitors are welcome, media's welcome. Just it's in the room next door, staff are welcome. Thank you.